I might regret saying this, but I think the whole arms race thing is just so cringe. I hate it. It's like a race to the bottom. It's like playing Candyland with a 3-year-old, right? Of course, they're going to do everything they can to like manipulate the board so that they can win and get to the castle first. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing with this process.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, welcome to the hottest political podcast in Nebraska, the Dan Parsons Show. Hey, and I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Joining me in just a moment, Nebraska State Senator John Fredrickson from Omaha's District 20. But before I introduce Senator Fredrickson, a shout out to our Friends of Dan, our Patreon support team. If you'd like to support the #1 political podcast in Nebraska with your hard-earned cash, hop on over to patreon.com and look up the Dan Parsons Show and join the fun. And for the next 10 people who sign up as a friend of Dan, we're giving away a Go Fact Yourself t-shirt from our friends at Raygun, the greatest store in the universe. Okay, here's my interview with Nebraska State Senator John Fredrickson. Enjoy. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome to the show for his very first appearance, Nebraska State Senator John Fredrickson. Senator, welcome to the Dan Parsons Show.
Thank you, Dan. I'm happy to be here. First appearance, but hopefully not the last.
Absolutely. Yeah, we won't do one and done. Well, a little background. Senator Fredrickson is a father, husband, mental health professional, and educator representing District 20 in the Nebraska legislature. He spent the last 10 years helping people overcome challenges through his work as a mental health provider and teaching the next generation of social workers as an adjunct professor at Columbia University. Senator Fredrickson was elected for the first time to the legislature back in 2022 in District 20 in Omaha by a whopping landslide margin of 82 votes. And you announced just last week your campaign for re-election. So congratulations on your service, your first term winding down. But maybe to start with, Senator, remind our audience where District 20 is in Omaha, and then maybe a follow-up. Why do you want to serve another term in the legislature?
Well, thank you, Dan, for that intro. And, so District 20 is, of course, the best legislative district in the entire state. I have to say that. Nice. It is in sort of central West Omaha. So on the eastern border, we have 72nd Street is the primary eastern boundary. Okay. To the northern part of the district is Pacific. So anything south of Pacific and north of the interstate is essentially in that area for District 20. I do go out to Dodge Street for a little square area randomly out west by Burke High School that was drawn into the district, I should say, during redistricting in 2020. And the western boundary is primarily 144th Street, but it does have a little triangle area that goes out to 153rd Street. So I know that sounds weird to verbally describe the district, but
for people who live there, they understand.
I mean, visually, it kind of looks like a little bit of a ship if you look at the actual map. So that's where District 20 is. It's got the West Side High School area. It's got some Millard School District. We got a little bit of OPS in there with Burke High School. So really proud of our district, and it's an incredible space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has traditionally been a very competitive race. Well, let's face it. Shoot, what race, which of the 49 legislative districts aren't competitive these days? So, landslide 82 votes. Remind our audience who held this seat prior to you.
So my predecessor was Senator John McCollister. He served in the seat for 8 years, and his predecessor was former Congressman and then State Senator Brad Ashford. So the seat itself has traditionally been held by both Democrats and Republicans, of course, for a nonpartisan institution, but we all have party registrations. I would describe the district as very purple. It's a very thoughtful district. I think my constituency is incredibly well informed. They follow the legislature closely. I hear this all the time when I'm out and about in the district, at the grocery store. Folks oftentimes engage me in really thoughtful discussion about what's happening in Lincoln. But also when I'm on the doors, folks are plugged in. They deeply understand the work we do in the legislature. So I feel incredibly fortunate to represent a district where, folks are plugged in and paying attention. And it's obviously an important thing to pay attention to.
Well, now more than ever, let's face it, there's a lot of challenges facing our nation and our state. And we hope, and that's what we try to achieve here on the show, is to try to not only lift up instead of tearing down, but hopefully educate and inform of why it's important to get involved in these races and support good candidates. Well, let's just dive in. Senator, what are some of the most important issues facing your district and the state of Nebraska?
So, I think all of our legislative districts are certainly microcosms of the state as a whole. But being in Omaha, I think of a lot of issues that are at the forefront of my constituents' minds. First and foremost, folks are really plugged into some of what's been happening on the federal level and what implications that's going to have on their day-to-day lives here in Nebraska and here in Omaha. And, the thing is, we're still learning a lot as a state, what ripple effects this is going to have. But I think about things like, for example, education, right? I've got a district with a number of young families that are really invested in ensuring their kids get the best possible education, which in Nebraska, we have a lot of reasons to be really proud of our public education system. Folks are really concerned about healthcare and coverage, right? We saw some changes with HR 1 to Medicaid expansion, for example. Nebraska is one state that opted into that. And so there's a lot of questions about, I hear from constituents, am I still going to have coverage? Am I going to be dropped? Am I going to be grandfathered in? And so there are concerns about that. Of course, folks are also concerned about the economy, and they're concerned about affordability, right? So that is anything and everything from the ability to find good jobs, make sure their kids can find good jobs when they graduate, that folks can afford their housing, right? That includes things like property taxes, but it also includes the availability of housing that they can actually afford. That's realistically affordable housing. So a lot of the issues I hear about are very much kitchen table issues. Another thing I hear a ton about is, of course, is mental health and behavioral health. This is something that, I'm a clinical social worker. My background's in social work. This is a huge passion of mine. And I feel really excited because I think that we as a society are a lot more open to talking about mental health and behavioral health. And I think that when you sort of have the let's just be frank, the world we're living in is can really take a toll, and it can be really overwhelming. And so folks are really interested in ensuring that Nebraskans have their basic needs met, but also that they're able to thrive here and that they're able to get support if and when they need that, whether it's for themselves, whether it's for their kids, whether it's for their family members. So that's another piece that I've been really proud to be a strong advocate for and plan to continue to do so should I be honored with this seat for another 4 years. Yeah, you talk about the economy. And again, I think that's,
traditionally that's what drives people to the polls. That's what drives people's decision in electing not only the president, but on down the ballot. And so what role does, and obviously property taxes is the perennial topic of discussion, has been for generations in this state. And there's some new proposals, some pretty, I'll just say it, radical proposals for possible ballot initiatives, and to try to address that issue of property taxes. So what's your thoughts on what the legislature should be doing when it comes to property taxes in the state?
Well, it's a huge question, right? If there was a silver bullet to this, it would have been solved long ago. To your point, Dan, this is a perennial issue, but it's also a very serious issue. And, the thing that in my last 3 years in the legislature that I've really learned, and I'm still learning a lot, of course. I like to consider myself a lifelong learner. I hope I never stop learning. Yeah. But one thing that's been really eye-opening for me in the legislature is that I hear so much from folks, whether it's colleagues, whether it's lobbying groups, constituents, that the discussion around property taxes is framed in a way of it being a crisis and that we need to address. People are losing their homes. They're at risk of losing their homes. And I think there's absolutely a kernel of truth in that. And what I mean when I say that is that there are folks who are, for example, at risk of losing their homes because of rising property taxes and rising property valuations. I think about my own neighborhood, for example. I've got neighbors who purchased their home 30, 40 years ago, right? They paid it all off.
Yep.
And their valuations have just gone up and up and up and up. And these are folks who are now on fixed incomes. Yep. And, it's just not sustainable to be able to continue to pay property tax on a home that's valued 4, 5, 6, 7 times the price that you initially paid for the home. And so that's a huge concern. And that's what I view as the real crisis here, right? Are folks that are in these situations, whether they're on fixed incomes, whether they are, working 3 or 4 jobs just to get by. And what's really frustrated me is that everyone likes to talk about that aspect of property taxes, but the proposals that we've seen in the legislature, at least since I've been there, have not been targeted towards those individuals. So we have seen proposals that have targeted large landowners, very wealthy landowners. Yep. And the folks who are really, whether they're on fixed income, whether they are disabled and unable to work, whether they're elderly, these folks are left behind. And we've seen this we've seen the exchange be, for example, a shift to higher sales taxes.
Right.
And, cities like Omaha, for example, the urban areas, we're the ones paying the majority of sales tax in the state. And so I've been a strong advocate for when we look at property tax reform, I'm here to represent my constituency, which is District 20 in Omaha, Nebraska. Of course, I'm a state senator, so I like to think that I try to represent the entire state, but I can't support plans that are going to leave my constituents behind. So the reality is, Dan, we can do this. Like, there are ways to actually cut property taxes and still invest in the services that we're proud of and we rely on: law enforcement, education, infrastructure like roads. I mean, these are all things that we do not have to sacrifice for lower property taxes. The key is to do it in a way that's targeted to folks who need it the most. So the individuals that everyone campaigns on saying it's a crisis, they're going to lose their home. Well, let's target relief to those individuals. And there are ways to do that. We can look at things like circuit breakers, for example. We have sister states across the country who've done a great job with this that says, okay, I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number here, but let's say we've decided as a state that your property taxes cannot exceed X% of your annual household income. Right? That's called a circuit breaker. So once you hit that percentage, your property tax rate freezes at that percentage. In other words, it makes it so it's sustainable. So if your annual household income goes up, your property taxes might increase a little bit with that. But the idea being that we don't want folks to be priced out of their homes because of their income. People's income changes, right? People change jobs, people retire, they go on fixed income.
Sure.
So there are dynamics like that we could look at that would really be targeted relief for individuals who need it the most.
Fascinating. I noticed in your election announcement, Senator, protecting Nebraska's right to have a voice on future ballot initiatives.
Yes.
I think one of the themes that emerged from the last session, which we followed numerous issues, most notably the medical marijuana issue, but there were several issues that were on the ballot. The public voted, in some cases, medical marijuana overwhelmingly. And yet here we are months later after Nebraskans voted, and we still don't have some of those initiatives into law, or at least not effective. So what's your concern? And maybe was that what you're alluding to in your announcement, that Nebraskans do have a right to a voice on future ballot initiatives? Do you fear that there's going to be an effort to try to claw back some of the rights that we have with the ballot initiatives in the state?
I do fear that, Dan. And this is actually, and I'm not trying to be an alarmist here, but I think this is one of the biggest threats to our state right now, is our citizens' ability to directly petition their government and the will of the voter and the will of the citizens to be honored by the state. You highlighted this perfectly. We saw a number of different ballot initiatives that the people of Nebraska voted on, in some cases overwhelmingly in support or in opposition to different proposals that were on the ballot. And we saw the legislature last year look at a number of those initiatives and chip away at that. And that for me was, there are a lot of things in the legislature that are stressful and difficult, but sitting through and listening to the debate on those bills was really painful. And what I mean when I say painful is that I found myself incredibly, for one, I think taken aback at sort of the blatant, what I viewed as disregard for how our institutions work and how voting in a free democracy works. And this idea that we can all of a sudden warp or change the will of the people.
That we know better, that the legislators know better than the people who,
And to take it further, Dan, I mean, I had a number of colleagues who very publicly said it with their full chest, they were proud of it, that the people didn't know what they were voting on, or the voters were confused. And that to me was like one of the most shocking parts of it, because those are the same voters that voted for you, right? Those are the same voters that brought you in.
What other mistakes did we make?
And so I thought that was a really cynical and frankly offensive approach. Like I said earlier, my district I consider incredibly well informed. When I talk to voters, whether we agree or not politically, they know what they're doing when they go to the ballot box. They read up. They are looking at issues that are important to them and their families and their communities, and they are voting accordingly. And so I'll also say this, Dan. There were some ballot initiatives that the result of that was maybe not what I necessarily wanted to see happen, but I wasn't there bringing bills or legislation to try to chip away, because the people of Nebraska spoke. So whether or not I agree with how the people voted, that's different. The reality is they voted, and that absolutely needs to be honored. We're one of only 24 states that allows this measure, where we can directly petition the government and the people can create laws, and that is an incredibly I think potent backstop on protecting democracy. And what I mean when I say that is that in a situation where the people that are elected or representing the citizenry, if they are not in fact honoring the position of the citizenry, the citizens can in fact do something about that. I do fear that this is going to be under threat. We have a couple of interim studies that a couple of my colleagues are bringing to look closer at the ballot initiative process. I'll be watching those hearings very closely to sort of see what the results of their studies indicate. But I do anticipate that we will see some legislation that might revisit that. And so that's an issue that I have on the top of my mind for this next year, to ensure that the people of Nebraska maintain that right.
This topic that I wanted to bring up hasn't gotten a lot of legs. The prospect that we may do a redistricting effort before the next census. And I think that's been, shot down, that idea. I haven't heard any more discussion about it. Anyway, your thoughts on that? You mentioned how your district has changed over the years, and there's reasons to do that. But this effort, again, from Washington, starting with Texas, to try to bring more Republican districts into that state, and then an arms race, and then California responds with their effort to put it on the ballot to actually have more Democratic representatives in the state to balance what Texas is doing. So this crazy arms race that's going on. But your thoughts, or any new updates on the efforts to possibly have a redistricting effort here in Nebraska?
Yeah, well, I might regret saying this, but I think the whole arms race thing is just so cringe. I hate it. It's like a race to the bottom, right? Yeah. It's like, so what I'll say about the state of Nebraska. So, I mean, just brief historical context. So obviously we have redistricting every 10 years. And that is a direct result of the census. So the census occurs every 10 years. And the idea is that over a 10-year period, populations shift, right? People move, people for all sorts of reasons, we need to have a better sense of what our states look like and what our districts look like. And so we use the data every 10 years, and this is nationwide. This isn't just Nebraska. We use the census data to revisit and redraw district maps. And the reason for that process is to ensure that there is equal representation of constituencies. So, for example, if the state of New York lost 30,000 in population and the state of Texas gained 30,000 in population, well, there might need to be adjustments on representation in Congress, because Congress, and the House side in particular, is there to represent the population of their districts. And so the same with legislative seats. So we each represent approximately 40,000 citizens of Nebraska. So redistricting certainly serves a purpose and a function. This whole idea of changing the rules in the middle of the game is what is just beyond cringe to me. It's desperate, right? It basically is saying, I'm concerned that my view and my way of leading is going to lose at the polls. So I am going to move the puzzle pieces in a way to fit. I mean, it's like playing Candyland with a 3-year-old, right? Of course, they're going to do everything they can to manipulate the board so that they can win and get to the castle first. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing with this process. I think serious legislators and people who are really thoughtful and understand the gravity of the role that we have are not even considering supporting something like this. And I'm confident in my colleagues in Nebraska that we'll have enough that will oppose us. I mean, I've got a handful of colleagues that I'm sure would jump at the opportunity to do something for their dear leader, President Trump. But that's not the reality of how government works. That's not what the people sent us to do in the state, and that's not what I expect we will be doing next year.
Well, and just taking that a little bit further, there's also been talk again from Washington about the efforts to change some voting rules, specifically the ability to vote by mail. And which I've just, being a lifelong political strategist, I just found it amazing that one political party decided a few elections ago that they were going to criticize and dissuade people from voting by mail, and it actually hurt them. And so I thought that was fascinating. But there's been those discussions here in Nebraska, and there's some counties in Nebraska, rural counties in Nebraska, that rely almost exclusively on mail-in ballots and voting. And I just find it maddening that we would have the discussion to take away the rights of how we can access the ballot. And so anyway, I hope there's not any efforts this legislative session to do any of that monkey business.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of the larger theme, right, Dan? I mean, this is very similar to what we were discussing earlier with the ballot initiatives. Yeah. If you are fearful that the citizenry is not in line with what you personally view as right or wrong, you do what you can to ensure the citizenry has a more difficult time, right? Whether that's voting, whether that's petitioning their government through a ballot initiative. And so, I mean, I'm a proponent that says I would love if we had 100% participation in the democratic process, right? In voting, that it's incredibly important to vote, and I think we should make it as accessible as possible for individuals. I mean, we have very safe and secure elections in our state, as evidenced by statements by the Secretary of State repeatedly over and over again. And you look at some other countries, for example, how they do voting. Sometimes, some countries do voting on the weekends. Some countries, it's a national holiday. Right. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, they make it so that individuals have the ability to get to the polls. In Nebraska, we have folks that work hourly jobs. We've got folks that have to pick up their kids, or they have to be in the field. They have to be harvesting. I mean, there's so many different things that come up that make it difficult for an individual to get to the poll especially to your point, Dan, in a rural part of the state where you might have to drive quite a bit to get to a poll.
Yeah.
So voting by mail is a way to ensure that all of the citizens of our country and our state have access and the ability to vote, regardless of where they live. So if you live in a rural part of the state, for example, you have every right to cast a ballot in every election. Should you choose to. So I think it's really short-sighted to chip away at things that make voting accessible.
Let's talk about higher education. Obviously, the state of Nebraska is facing some financial challenges. Some of those assessments are coming back a little more positive, but let's face it, the ag economy is in shambles. And I've talked with several ag leaders that are really concerned about the future, this next harvest and how, because of tariffs, they don't have a place to sell their products. Anyway, that because we rely so much on agriculture, that trickles down. And now the funding for higher education, the University of Nebraska is really in dire straits. I mean, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln announced a ton of cuts of programs that they're contemplating. I think the vote will be later before the first of the year. But so how concerned are you about the overall economy of the state and I guess specifically funding for the university?
Well, that's a big question.
Start anywhere you'd like.
I am concerned about the economy and the university, and maybe I'll start with the economy aspect. So, I think one of the things that we need to be really concerned about in our state is job creation and the availability of jobs, right? And so we have a number of businesses, small businesses and large businesses, who have really struggled in Nebraska to fill open positions. And we have a very low unemployment rate in our state. The reality is when you look at the data and you analyze reasons why people are or are not working, essentially everyone who's able to work in our state is working. And so we need to really get aggressive on ensuring that we have folks who, if they are graduating from universities here or high school or college, that they see opportunity, whether that's in the trades, whether that's in a 4-year degree, but even beyond that they also have opportunities in the marketplace, and that they want to be here and they want to come here. We also need to ensure that businesses want to be here. We want Nebraska to be a place where that's open for business. And so this is all an ecosystem that feeds into each other. And, that's a huge concern of mine because, again, the less opportunity we have here, the less likely it is for someone who's just graduated high school or college or grad school. If there's not a lot of opportunity, they're going to go where the opportunity is, of course. The university component's another huge concern of mine. So I actually voted red on the biennial budget this past year, and that's a really unusual thing to do. I mean, typically what you'll see is you might have 1 or 2 senators who vote against the biennial budget, but certainly in recent history, you usually get around 40, 45 votes on the green votes on the budget. That was not the case this past year. And one of the large driving factors of why I voted red, amongst, I think some shenanigans that were going on of shifting funds and sweeping funds, et cetera, to sort of make it appear as though we had a truly balanced budget when the reality is we did not and do not. But one of my biggest concerns was that the university, the funding to that I knew was not sustainable, and it would result directly in some of what we've seen recently in the news, which includes program cuts. That's really disheartening because going back to the economy, right? Public universities are
an economic driver.
Huge economic drivers. The university is one of the largest economic drivers in our entire state. It is University of Nebraska, the entire system, UNO in Omaha, incredible. UNMC. I mean, this is something we should be incredibly proud of as Nebraskans. And historically, we have been, including the legislature. The legislature from the entire, from across the political spectrum has historically been incredibly proud of our university. And there's been this sort of like slow chipping away of that. I think on a national scale, this sort of chipping away of this idea of education and higher education.
Yeah.
But I think that that's sort of rippled into Nebraska. And that's really unfortunate because, again, long term, this hurts the economy. This hurts economic development. It's an incredibly short-sighted thing to do when we look at appropriating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, Senator, I'll just mention from your announcement of your reelection campaign last week, some pretty impressive list of endorsements, including Omaha Mayor John Ewing and Heath Mello, President and CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce. Will this race be as competitive as your last one? And we maybe talked about this in the opening, but anyway, some impressive leaders in Omaha who are supporting your campaign. And anyway, just your wrap-up thoughts on the campaign as you get ready to start the next session of the legislature, and at the same time campaigning out there. So anyway, your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I was incredibly honored to have both the mayor's endorsement as well as of Heath, the Greater Omaha Chamber, head of the chamber there. And I really appreciate their trust in the leadership I've done. I think that's a testament to how I have legislated in the Unicam. I've always been really thoughtful of my constituents, of the city of Omaha, which is where I represent. And so I hope to continue to do that and continue to be a thoughtful and steady, and I'll even say nuanced person in the legislature. In other words, someone who's thinking hard about every piece of legislation that comes in front of us, and what are the not just sort of direct implications, but the second, third, and fourth level implications on those. So I'm excited about the race. I've started knocking doors and talking to neighbors, and that's been really energizing, and it's actually really fun as an incumbent because you get a lot. First of all, you get a lot more into detailed conversations about the work, and people are excited about the work. So I feel good about that.
Yeah. Well, my last question, Senator, how can people find out more about your campaign? How can they reach you? And we're happy to put that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. So my campaign website is johnfornebraska.com. If you head there, there's all sorts of information about me, the campaign. There's ways to donate. There's ways to sign up for yard signs, volunteer, knock doors, all sorts of things along that. You can also reach out to the campaign. The email is hello@johnfornebraska.com.
Very good. Senator John Fredrickson, District 20 in Omaha, thanks for your service and best of luck in your campaign. And let's not make this one and done. You're welcome to come back when we get into the meat of the session anytime, Senator.
I would love to come back. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, thanks, Senator Fredrickson, for joining me today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show, and good luck in your reelection bid and the upcoming legislative session. I'm sure it's going to be another doozy. Hey, don't forget to show us some love and hit the subscribe button over on our YouTube channel. And leave me a comment. I promise I'll respond. Hey, thanks to the Parsons team who made this show possible. Chase Porter, our executive producer, Ike Simonis, producer and graphic design, Penology Tech Solutions for their technical help, and Kim Remington, Parsons PR's Director of Operations. And thanks to each of you for your support and for tuning in. Okay, that's today's show. Go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.